Okay, let's unpack this. Um, Imagine this. One of the world's biggest pop stars, someone everyone thinks of as quintessentially British, says they actually feel culturally connected to a completely different country.
Yeah, that's quite a hook, isn't it? It
Yeah,
really flips the script on how we usually think about identity,
totally.
especially for someone living such a public, global kind of life.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what really shapes that feeling of belonging.
Absolutely. So this deep dive, we're going to explore those really complex layers of identity and also look at the sometimes heavy price tag that comes with that level of fame.
Hmm.
And maybe peek behind the curtain a bit at the relationship artists have with their own work, which can be, well, complicated.
Right. And we're doing this looking at some recent things Ed Sheeran has been saying.
Yeah, exactly. Our main source here is some excerpts from a BBC article which draws heavily on his conversation on the Louis Theroux podcast. So our mission really is to pull out the most interesting insights, the little nuggets from these sources, try and understand his angle on culture, his career, and, what it's actually like living under that intense public spotlight.
Right. Let's jump in then.
Okay.
So one of the first things that really jumps out is that direct statement he makes about his cultural identity.
Mm.
I mean, despite being born and raised in Suffolk, England, he says pretty plainly, actually, I class my culture as Irish.
Wow. And it's not just a random feeling, is it? He connects it very specifically to his roots.
Exactly. His dad's family is from Belfast. He mentions this huge family, 7 siblings, and apparently all their family holidays growing up were spent in Ireland.
Okay, so a strong family connection.
Yeah, but it seems to go deeper than just holidays.
Yeah.
He points specifically to his first musical experiences, saying they were actually in Ireland. He grew up with traditional Irish music playing in the house. And for him, that foundational experience seems really key to where his cultural identity formed. Maybe even more than, where he was actually born.
That makes sense. He also sort of says he doesn't overthink it too much.
Right.
It's just something he's genuinely proud of, wants to express. And he kind of pushes back on the idea that if you're born in Britain, you have to be only British.
Yeah, he mentions how many people have mixed backgrounds, being half this or quarter this, that sort of thing.
Right.
It feels like a very personal definition of culture he's using. Like, there aren't strict rules. It should come down to how you feel, your upbringing, what traditions or places you sort of lean into.
Uh-huh.
And interestingly, he calls Ireland his second home, musically. Says it's the place he finds the most musical success.
Which is fascinating, isn't it? That overlap, the culture he feels closest to is also where his music hits hardest, apparently.
Yeah.
It does make you wonder how much our cultural grounding feeds into our creative side.
It certainly blurs those lines between, say, nationality and cultural identity. Shows they're not always the same thing, not fixed.
Okay, so moving on from that sense of belonging, let's look at the other side of the coin. The significant costs that come with his level of global fame, especially for his family.
Right, and this is where you really see the personal impact, I think. He's married to Cherry Seaborn. They've got 2 young kids, and he's famously, fiercely private about their image.
Yeah.
He shared with Louis Theroux just how incredibly difficult it is to do just, well, normal stuff, everyday things.
Like taking his kids to the zoo.
Yeah.
Or a park without someone trying to film them constantly.
Exactly.
That detail about him mourning those simple parts of life, like wishing he could just push his child on a swing in a public park without it turning into some weird spectacle, that's really quite poignant.
It really highlights the depth of that sacrifice, doesn't it? He knows people say, well, that's the trade-off for being famous.
Right, the standard line.
But his point, and it's a sharp one, is that his children didn't choose this. They didn't sign up for that kind of public scrutiny.
So the burden of fame falls heaviest on the people around him, the ones who didn't ask for any of it.
Precisely.
The source material also touched on something smaller, but related, didn't it, about how fame impacts even simple things like travel.
Oh, yeah, that was interesting. He actually prefers commercial flights. Even mentioned flying Ryanair from a gig in Italy once.
Ryanair!
And he connects it to environmental concerns. Says he likes the environment, likes trees, basically finds it hard to justify constant private jet use. Though he admits he does sometimes, for packed promotional schedules. You probably have to sometimes.
Sure. But it shows a level of awareness, doesn't it? Thinking about his impact, even with the pressures of his job.
Yeah.
It's just another layer, isn't it? How that life of extreme fame isn't just the big stuff, the shows and awards. It gets into every small decision, like how you fly. And this intense public life, it must inevitably impact his work and how he feels about his own music.
Yeah, and this is where you get a really interesting, almost paradoxical insight into how artists relate to their own craft. He says the two things that bring him actual joy, professionally speaking, are writing songs and performing them live.
Okay, makes sense.
But he hates releasing the music.
Hang on, hates releasing it. That feels completely backwards for a musician. I mean, isn't that the whole point? Why the hate?
Well, his explanation is that the whole release process is incredibly stressful for him. He loves the songs so much when they're just his, or his and his collaborators, just theirs. Putting them out there means risking that relationship changing. If the public doesn't get them, or if the criticism affects how he feels about his own art, he's trying hard not to let that happen, it seems.
Okay, I see. So it's about protecting that initial creation, that pure connection he has with the song from the potential negativity of public reaction and judgment. That gives you a real peek behind the curtain, doesn't it? The emotional toll of putting your art out there, even when you're at the absolute top.
Totally. And this emotional landscape seems connected to how he views his career success overall. He feels he had his commercial peak, what the world would call his peak, with the Divide album.
Right. The sources mention him feeling like he's kind of coasting now. Not sure he'll hit those numbers again.
But, and this is where it gets really interesting and sort of flips conventional wisdom on its head. He immediately follows that up by saying that period, that peak fame, that supposed pinnacle of success, was actually his unhappiest time.
Wow. Seriously. So the exact point where the world saw him as reaching the absolute summit was personally, for him, a low point in terms of happiness. That's a stark contrast.
It really is. And he directly compares that to where he is now. He says he's much happier with the balance I've got now.
So even though he might be past that specific commercial high point,
he's found much greater personal contentment. And it's not like he's stopped working. The sources mention he's still creating actively. Recently released 2 acoustic albums, planning another pop album play for later this year.
Right.
So it's not about stopping. It seems more about redefining the journey for himself.
So maybe recalibrating what success actually means, shifting away from just the external stuff, sales and fame, towards more internal things like balance and happiness.
It powerfully highlights that tension, doesn't it, between external validation and internal well-being. His story really makes you question if achieving what the world called the absolute peak actually lines up with personal fulfillment.
So, okay, wrapping this up, what are the main takeaways from this deep dive? We've explored a really interesting view on cultural identity, showing it's not just about where you're born. We've seen the significant and sometimes painful personal cost of extreme fame, not just for him, but for his family, too.
Yeah, the impact on privacy.
And we've had a peek at the emotional stress involved in actually releasing creative work, even for someone at that level.
And crucially, we've seen how someone can feel they're past their conventional peak of success, yet actually be much happier because they've found a better life balance.
Which raises some important questions for all of us, doesn't it? I mean, these themes. Where do we feel we belong? What do we sacrifice for our passions or jobs? How do we define success and happiness?
Yeah, they resonate way beyond just the world of celebrity.
So here's a thought to leave you with. If identity isn't just about birthplace or even where you live now, what truly shapes it for you?
And maybe more pointedly, if the moment the world says you've peaked is also the moment you might be unhappiest, what does that tell us about how we measure a life well lived? What should we actually be aiming for?
Definitely something to mull over as you go about your day.